The prairie lay flat and endless beneath a copper sky, the last light of day burning low like a dying campfire. Dust swirled around a lone rider moving slow, his coat long and weather-worn, the brim of his hat bent from years of sun and wind. He rode as though the world behind him no longer mattered, and the one ahead held no promise. When the wind shifted, he caught the faint rattle of a windmill and the dull thump of something metallic striking wood. He turned his horse toward it, saying nothing, only narrowing his eyes at the smoke rising thin from a chimney on the horizon. By the time he reached the cabin, the sun had sunk, leaving the sky a deep bruised violet. The place looked half forgotten. Fence posts splintered, doors sagging on its hinge, a single lantern burning behind a curtain. He dismounted slow, the leather creaking beneath him, and knocked once. No answer. He pushed the door open with the barrel of his revolver. Inside, the air smelled of blood and wood smoke. A young man lay stretched across the floorboards, one hand clutching at his chest, the other gripping a revolver slick with sweat. His face was pale, more boy than man, but his eyes were fierce with the kind of fear that knows exactly what's coming. "Easy," the cowboy said, lowering his gun. His voice was steady, quiet enough to calm a skittish horse. "You ain't got long to waste your breath. Best use it." The boy swallowed hard, trying to sit up. "So if they come," his voice cracked. "Hide, my sister." The cowboy looked around the room. In the far corner, a figure moved, small, still, and silent. The girl stepped into the lamplight, clutching a knife that looked too big for her hand. Her dark hair was tied back with a strip of cloth, her face streaked with ash and dust. She didn't flinch beneath his gaze. "Who's after you?" he asked. The boy coughed, crimson blooming through his shirt. "They'll be here before moonrise. Took something that wasn't theirs, and they mean to take it back. Don't matter if they burn the world to do it." His breath hitched. He bit down on a groan. The cowboy crouched beside him. "Name." The boy shook his head weakly. "Don't matter. Just hide her. Promise me that." The cowboy didn't answer. He studied the sister instead. There was no fear in her eyes, only a quiet resolve that made her seem older than she was. She held herself like someone who had learned early that hope was a luxury. "You know how to use that knife?" he asked. She nodded once. "Then you don't need hiding." The boy tried to protest, but a spasm of pain silenced him. The cowboy reached for a cloth, pressing against the wound. The blood soaked through at once. "Don't waste your words," the cowboy said softly. "Save your breath for the dawn." Outside, the wind picked up, scraping against the shutters like fingernails. The horse shifted uneasily, sensing what men often couldn't. The cowboy straightened, walked to the window, and looked out. The horizon had gone black, but there were faint flickers of light in the distance, torches moving slow, deliberate, too steady to be travelers. "They're coming," the girl whispered. He nodded. "You got any place to run?" She shook her head. "Then we don't run." He checked his revolver, spinning the cylinder once before snapping it shut. Each click echoed through the cabin like the tolling of a bell. The boy tried again to speak, his voice barely a thread. "You don't understand. You can't fight them." "I've fought worse," the cowboy said. The rain began, soft at first, then heavier, beating against the roof in uneven rhythm. The sound filled the silence between them. The cowboy moved to the table, took a lantern, and turned down its flame until the room dimmed to shadows. The sister knelt beside her brother, whispering words the cowboy didn't try to hear. He stood by the door, watching the dark field beyond. The torches drew closer, orange points cutting to the curtain of rain. He could count them now. 6, maybe 7. The boy's breathing grew shallow. "Please, hide her." The cowboy tipped his hat lower, his voice like gravel underfoot. "Ain't my way to hide from what's coming." He opened the door a crack. The wind carried the smell of wet earth and distant fire. Behind him, the lantern flickered once, then steadied. He stepped out onto the porch, rain running off the brim of his hat, the night stretching infinite before him. Somewhere in the dark, horses whinnied and men shouted low. He drew his revolver, not in anger, not in fear, just because it was time. Inside, the girl whispered prayer. Outside, the cowboy waited, and the prairie held its breath. The rain had settled into a steady rhythm by the time the night deepened, a curtain of water that blurred the line between earth and sky. The cabin seemed to float in that darkness, fragile and flickering, a single heartbeat against the vastness of the plains. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of wet wood and iron. The cowboy sat near the door, revolver resting across his knee, his silhouette motionless in the dim lamplight. He watched the window, though there was nothing to see but the shadow of rain. Behind him, the girl tended to her brother. She tore strips from an old shirt, pressing him to the wound, whispering to keep him conscious. Her hands were steady, though her jaw trembled. The cowboy listened to her voice, soft, rhythmic, carrying a kind of faith that had nothing to do with God. It reminded him of something he once heard long ago, before the war, when life had been simpler and promises still meant something. The brother's breath rasped unevenly. "They'll kill us all," he murmured, his eyes unfocused. "You should have gone. Should have left me." She shushed him, her voice low but fierce. "Stop talking like that. You're not dying here." The cowboy's eyes flicked toward them. "He might," he said quietly, "but he won't die alone." She turned to him, the firelight catching the wet sheen of her hair. "Why are you helping us?" He thought about it for a moment before answering. "Maybe because I remember what it feels like to be left behind." She studied him, searching his face for truth. He didn't meet her gaze. Outside, the wind shifted, carrying the distant sound of horses, faint but growing. The cowboy reached for his rifle and began loading shells with slow precision. Each motion was practice, calm, a ritual as familiar as breathing. The girl rose, wiping blood for her fingers. "You said you fought worse. What kind of worse?" He paused. "The kind that don't wear a face anymore. The kind that stays with you when the shooting's done." He didn't say the word war, but it hung between them, heavy and understood. The brother stirred again, his voice weaker now. "They're led by Vorn," he said. "Elias Vorn. He'll come himself. He don't send men to do what he likes doing." The cowboy froze mid-motion, the rifle half raised. "Vorn," he repeated, his tone flat, almost disbelieving. "You know him?" the girl asked. He nodded once. "Used to ride with him. Long time ago, before he decided law was just another word for loot." The revelation hung sharp in the air. The girl's eyes widened, but the cowboy didn't look at her. He stared into the fire, seeing not the flames but old memories, dust, gunpowder, a line of bodies left in the sun. The boy coughed, blood flecking his lips. "He'll kill her for what I took." "What did you take?" the cowboy asked. The brother hesitated. Then, with a trembling hand, he pointed toward the floorboards near the table. "Under there." The cowboy pried up the plank. Inside, wrapped in oilcloth, lay a small leather book bound with a strip of wire. He opened it. Inside were rows of names, columns of numbers, notes written in a scrawl that belonged to a cruel and careful man. "It's his ledger," the brother whispered. "Proof he killed for land, for gold, for favors from men who still wear badges. If she lives to hand it to the marshal in Abilene, he burns for it." The cowboy closed the book. "Then that's what we'll see done." The girl stared at him. "You'll help us get there?" He shook his head. "No one's riding anywhere tonight. They're already too close. We hold here till dawn." Outside, a faint flash of lightning rolled across the sky, followed by a low growl of thunder. The cowboy stood and moved to the window. Between the raindrops, he thought he saw the faint glimmer of torchlight. He rested his hand on the rifle, eyes narrowing. The girl joined him at the window. "You could still leave," she said. "You don't owe us." He looked at her then, really looked. The fear was still there, but beneath it was something steadier. Defiance. He almost smiled. "You're wrong," he said. "I owe this to someone. I just can't remember who." The thunder cracked louder, nearer. The boy groaned, fading fast. The cowboy checked his revolver, then his rifle, his movements measured, ritualistic. Rain drummed the roof like the ticking of a clock, counting down to violence. He blew out the lamp, letting darkness swallow the room until only the faint red glow of the fire remained. "Get some rest," he said softly. "You'll need it." The girl knelt beside her brother again, whispering something he was too far gone to hear. The cowboy leaned against the doorframe, eyes on the horizon beyond the rain. In the distance, another flash lit the fields, and for an instant he saw them. Riders, black shapes cutting through the storm. He didn't move, didn't breathe, just waited, feeling the old rhythm returning, the steady calm that came before killing. When the thunder rolled again, he whispered to himself, "They're closer than dawn," and the storm kept coming. The rain turned from a whisper to a roar, washing over the land in cold sheets that drowned out all sound but thunder and breath. The girl woke to the creak of the floorboards and the sharp click of metal. The cowboy stood by the window, his silhouette backlit by brief flashes of lightning, the rifle balanced in his hands. His face was calm, almost peaceful, the stillness of a man who had already made peace with dying. "Stay down," he said without looking at her. His voice was steady, unhurried. "They're here." Through the window, she saw them, dark shapes cutting through the storm, their torches hissing as rain met flame. 7 riders fanned out across the field, moving slow, deliberate, like hunters closing in on wounded prey. The cowboy crouched, eyes narrowing as one of the riders dismounted and lifted a lantern high, casting a dull gold light across the cabin walls. "They're trying to spook us," he murmured. "They'll circle first, look for movement, then they'll rush." Her brother stirred on the cot, his breathing ragged. "It's him," he whispered. "Vorn's with them." The cowboy's jaw tightened. "I know." He moved to the door and pulled it open just a crack, letting the cold air in. "You keep quiet. Don't come near that window unless I say." The girl gripped her knife, knuckles white, her heart pounding in her throat. She wanted to speak, to ask what would happen when the shooting started, but no words came. Instead, she watched him, how he moved, how he checked the rifle's chamber with practiced ease, how his shoulders never slumped. He looked like a man built out of storm and dust, carrying the weight of something older than the war he'd survived. Outside, a horse screamed and a voice rose above the thunder. "Cabin, you got one chance to come out and give what's ours." The cowboy leaned against the doorframe. "That you, Vorn?" A pause, then a low, cruel laugh. "Didn't think you'd still be breathing, friend. Last I heard, you'd taken to drifting like a ghost." "Maybe I did," the cowboy said. "And maybe this ghost aims to haunt you a while." Gunfire cracked the air. The window shattered. The girl screamed, ducking low as splinters flew. The cowboy dropped to one knee and fired once, clean, precise. A torch fell, its bearer collapsing into the mud. Lightning split the sky, revealing chaos. Riders scattering, firing blindly through the storm. "Reload that pistol," he barked, tossing her the revolver. She fumbled but obeyed, fingers trembling. Each shot outside was a heartbeat counting toward the inevitable. He fired again, then again. Another shape fell. The thunder drowned out their cries, but she could see them through the flashes. Men slipping in mud, horses panicking. Smoke and rain blurred everything into confusion. The cowboy moved like he'd done this 100 times before, like every bullet was part of some grim rhythm only he could hear. The brother tried to sit up, gasping. "Let me fight," he rasped. "Lie still," the cowboy said, not turning. "You're worth more alive than dead." The boy managed a weak grin. Not for long. He lifted his own gun, aimed toward the window, and fired. A cry came from the dark outside, then silence. The cowboy looked back once. "You got grit, kid." A moment later, the boy took a bullet to the chest. The sound was soft, almost polite, a single thud, then nothing. The girl screamed his name and crawled to him, blood soaking her hands. The cowboy's gaze flickered, just for a heartbeat, and then hardened again. He stepped past her, shoved the door open, and walked out into the storm. The rain struck his face cold, sharp as needles. Torches burned low, struggling against the downpour. 3 men were left standing, one of them tall, broad, face shadowed beneath a hat pulled low. "Vorn!" The cowboy raised his rifle. "You could have walked away," he called. Vorn laughed, his teeth glinting in the firelight. "And miss seeing what you've turned into? Not a chance." They moved at the same time. Gunfire tore through the rain, echoing across the plains. The cowboy felt the impact of a bullet tear through his shoulder, but he didn't stop. He dropped one man, then another. Vorn kept advancing, his revolver flashing bright in the darkness. The girl watched in the doorway, frozen in terror and awe. The two men fired again, 2 shots that seemed to happen at once. When the smoke cleared, only one remained standing. The cowboy staggered, blood running down his arm, his breath heavy but even. Vorn was down, clutching his side, crawling backward through the mud. The cowboy walked toward him, slow and deliberate, the rain hissing off his hat brim. He aimed, but before he could fire, a gust of wind flared the dying torches, setting the dry grass ablaze. Flames leapt upward, licking at the cabin's side. He hesitated, just long enough for Vorn to vanish into the dark. The fire spread fast, feeding on wind and fury. The girl screamed for her brother, still inside. The cowboy turned, the orange glow painting his face in ruin. He pulled her away from the door as the roof began to crackle and fall. "Don't look," he said, voice low, fierce final. "There's nothing left to see." Behind them, the cabin burned, a pillar of flame against the storm. The rain couldn't quench it, not yet. The girl fell to her knees, sobbing into her hands. The cowboy stood beside her, staring into the fire as if it might burn away the ghosts of every choice he'd ever made. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolled again, faint, retreating. The night wasn't over, but the storm had changed. Dawn crept slow across the horizon, a pale light crawling over the soaked prairie and the smoking wreck of the cabin. The storm had passed, but its silence was worse than the thunder. The girl sat in the mud, her face streaked with ash and tears, staring at what remained, a blackened skeleton of wood, still steaming. The air smelled of rain, blood, and burnt pine. The cowboy stood a few yards away, one hand pressed against his wounded shoulder, the other gripping the rifle like it was the only thing keeping him upright. His hat was gone, lost somewhere in the night. His hair clung dark to his forehead, and his breath came slow but steady. She rose shakily, her legs unsteady beneath her. "He's gone," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, brittle. "My brother's gone." He didn't look at her. "I know." She stepped closer, anger beginning to crack through the grief. "You could have saved him." He turned his gaze to her, and for a heartbeat, something raw flickered there, guilt, maybe, or the ghost of old failures. "No," he said quietly. No one could have saved him once they came. But he didn't die for nothing. She wanted to hate him, to scream that it wasn't enough, but the words burned out before they reached her mouth. Instead, she sank to her knees again, shoulders shaking. The cowboy knelt beside her, grimacing as pain flared in his side. From his coat, he pulled the small leather book, the ledger, and held it out to her. "This is what he gave his life for," he said. "If you get this to the marshal in Abilene, it'll bury Vorn and every man who rode with him." She stared at the book, then at him. "And what about you?" He looked toward the horizon, where the first sliver of sun cut through the clouds. "I'll find what's left of Vorn. He's out there still. And I can't leave something half-finished." She shook her head. "You can't go after him alone. You're hurt." He almost smiled. "Ain't the first time." He rose to his feet, wincing, and adjusted the rifle strap across his back. "You ride east. Keep low till you hit the river. Follow it till you see the rail line. Someone will take you in." Her fingers clutched the ledger tight. "And if I don't? Then your brother dies for nothing. Don't make it for nothing." His voice was rough but gentle, carrying a weight that didn't need raising. The wind shifted, carrying the faint echo of hoofbeats, distant but real. The girl's eyes widened. "They're coming back?" He turned, scanning the empty horizon. "Maybe, or maybe it's just ghosts." She wanted to believe him, but the fear stayed. She stood, wiping her face with her sleeve. "You could come with me," she said softly. "You don't have to stay here." He met her eyes, and something like warmth flickered beneath the steel. "There's always someone left to hide, someone to stand for. This time it's you." For a long moment, neither spoke. The prairie stretched endless before them, the light brightening just enough to turn the burnwood gold. He walked toward his horse, each step slow but certain. When he reached the saddle, He turned back once more. You ride hard, you hear? Don't stop till you're clear. She nodded, tears glistening again. What'll I tell them about you? He looked toward the east, where the sun climbed higher. Tell him I was a man who didn't hide when it mattered. He swung into the saddle, grimacing at the pain in his arm but steadying himself. The girl watched as he adjusted his coat, the fabric still damp with rain and blood. For a moment, she saw the outline of what he'd once been. A soldier, maybe, or something holier than that, a man still trying to earn his right to rest. The sound of distant thunder, this time not from clouds but hooves, rolled faintly again. He turned his horse toward it, squinting into the rising light. The wind caught his coat, snapping it like a flag. She called after him, her voice breaking. What's your name? He paused, hand resting on the reins. The question hung there, fragile as morning mist. Then he said, almost to himself, doesn't matter much now. He nudged the horse forward. Mud splashed beneath its hooves as he rode west, into the last breath of the fading storm. She stood watching until he became a dark speck against the gold horizon, until even the sound of his horse was gone. The wind softened. The smoke thinned. The land, scarred but alive, began to glow beneath the new day. The girl clutched the ledge at her chest, eyes fixed eastward. Behind her, the ashes of the cabin smoldered faintly, whispering their last heat into the dawn. Ahead, the promise of distance waited, justice, survival, and the echo of a man who hadn't hidden, not even when he should have. And when the wind rose again, it carried a single trace of gunpowder and rain, fading slow into silence, like the memory of a vow kept at the edge of the world.